Next, we have Paresh, who's going to talk about his grandfather. Paresh, grandfather.
I never actually met my grandfather, my Bappa. Unfortunately, he passed away before I was actually born. But his memories still live on through the stories that my father and my uncles often tell me. His name was Dajibai Baradbai Mistry. Dajibai was a very studious individual. Most of his schooling, his childhood, was in India. And he enjoyed school. He had this real thirst for knowledge. Always wanting to know more, always wanting to learn more. Unfortunately, his father passed away when Dajibai was only 15 years old. And it became quite apparent very quickly that he would have to leave school, find work, and support his mother and his siblings. Fortunately, he did find work. He found work as an apprentice carpenter. And like anything that Dajibai did, he wanted to be the best at it. So before long, he became very skilled as a carpenter. He had lots of opportunities. One such opportunity was to go to Mumbai to work in the shipbuilding industry. After marrying my Baba, Gashibin, my Baba was constantly thinking, how can I better myself? What else can I do? And so after talking to a few associates and a few relatives, he decided to travel to Kenya. And in those days, the cheapest, or one of the cheapest modes of transport was to travel by yacht. And there were stories of yachts capsizing or going astray. And so it was a risk that my Baba took. But fortunately for him, the yacht did arrive safely to Kenya. When he arrived in Kenya, he found work very quickly because of his skill in carpentry. And it was difficult in the early stages, trying to establish yourself. So although he had a job, it was still difficult financially. But once he had some stability, my Ba joined him a few years later. And again, trying to establish yourself with an ever-growing family. So there was my Baba, my Ba. They had 6 sons and 1 daughter. So a big family to financially support. And it was difficult in those early days. A relative of my Baba spoke to him at a function and said, or asked, why don't you buy a business? There's a hardware shop which is coming on the market. Why don't you purchase a business? And my Baba had never had any experience in business at all. But he did have this entrepreneurial mindset. So he took that risk, he took that chance. And like any business, the first few years can be quite difficult. But after those first few years, things started to get better, improve. The family were in a very stable environment. We were enjoying celebrating various Hindu festivals with the Indian community that was there in Kenya. In fact, they even managed a holiday to Tanzania. Life was great for them. 1963, and Kenya got its independence. And as we know, or some of us will know, that there was a lot of political uncertainty, particularly for Indians living in Kenya and the wider East Africa. And so my Baba thought, what should I do? What should I do for myself and my family? And again, after speaking to some close friends and relatives, he decided to make a leap of faith in some ways and travel to the UK, to the United Kingdom, in search of work and potentially that better life. So he made arrangements for my Ba and his family to travel back to India, and he then made that onward journey to the United Kingdom. In 1965, he arrived in the United Kingdom, in Bradford, of all places. He found a job, again, quite quickly. It was in terms of the mills and the woolen mills that there were there in Bradford. So in a place called Saltaire in Bradford. And he worked hard. He worked night shifts sometimes. He worked 12-hour shifts to provide that stability again for his family. Once he, again, like in Kenya, in the UK, once he developed that stability, my ba and the rest of the family started moving and coming across to the United Kingdom. And they lived in this small terraced house, a 2-bedroom terraced house. And if you can imagine, my ba, their 6 sons and 1 daughter in this 2-bedroom house. But they managed, they survived. They were resourceful. At that time, there were so many other Indians coming to the United Kingdom. Some of them, my Bappa knew from either Kenya or from India. And so he would help them, he would support them, he would guide them, he would give them shelter as well. So if you can imagine this house with 2 bedrooms, already 8 people, 9 people, living there. And then giving shelter to others as well. And this wasn't just for a night or 2 nights, this was for months as well, until these people found their own stability and their own life in terms of their job. And even today, when we meet some of these people, they would often tell us the respect that they have, the high regard that they have for my Bappa and my Ba. We have a few photos of my Bappa, not many, just a few. But there is one photo that we have. Most photos from that generation that we see are very kind of poker face who tell people to smile and they don't know what that means. But there's this one photo where he is smiling. In his arms, I think this picture was taken around 1974. In his arms, he's holding my eldest cousin sister, probably about 6 months old. And his face is glowing, he's smiling, whilst he's cradling his eldest granddaughter. He'd never seen a picture of him smiling, but in this one photo, he is smiling, welcoming the next generation into his family. Dajibai Bharatbhai Mistry. Family was his #1 priority. He always strived to do better for himself and his family. And for me, he'll always be my inspiration. Namaste.